Hi guys, my name is Chloe, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing the fantasy romance reader tag. Now, it's been a good while since I've sat down to actually film anything, just because I haven't really felt like filming. I haven't had any thoughts and ideas of what to film. I know I don't want to be doing monthly wrap-ups anymore, and I still need to think of an alternative to this. Maybe not monthly, but something to replace that. I am still going to be doing my unboxing videos because I'm always super excited to unbox those, so I love filming that and posting those. The ideas that I have had for videos though, for ones that I am working on at the minute, are kind of longer projects. They're ones in which I need to read quite a few books in order to make the video, and one of them will be reading the fantasy romance books from Fairy Loot, because I was very lucky to get a place on the subscription and I have the first two books that they've released, and my plan with that is to read the first three, do a video, summing up my thoughts on them, on the editions, on the stories, bits like that, and at least doing it for a year so that I can just decide if I want to keep the subscription or not. So that's one of the ideas, and that's why I want to do this tag today. It's a little bit of fun, hopefully to get to know me more as a fantasy romance reader, ready for those videos whenever they come out. So this book, there are quite a few questions. I think there's like 10 or 11 or so, so I'm just going to get started and work through them. I had quite a lot of fun putting my answers together for this, so yeah, let's get going. So the first question is, what book got you into fantasy romance for the first time? And I actually didn't know what this was off the top of my head, but I was kind of surprised by the answer, to be honest. I thought it was going to be I thought it was going to be Throne of Glass, but I don't think that's technically a fantasy romance, even though there's romance in it. The fantasy plot is a lot more dominant. So actually, looking back at my Goodreads, the first fantasy romance book that I ever read, which I didn't realise it was this one, was actually for Fortuna Sworn by KJ Sutton. Only the first book, and then I don't think I got on with the series. I still need to read that one. But then right after that I read the ACOTAR series, and that's the series that I thought it was. I just completely forgot that I'd read Fortuna Sworn first. So yeah, I imagine ACOTAR is a lot of people's first fantasy romance, but yeah, it was Fortuna Sworn technically. Question number 2. If you could pick one fantasy world to move to for the rest of your life, which world would you move to? And this was tough. A lot of the fantasy romances are quite fantasy romance world that I read are quite grim, medieval, realistic, probably not very nice places to live. So it took me a while to answer this, but I have settled on the world from the Once Upon a Heart series, also I guess the Caraval world. I just really love the magical, cozy vibes, the pastel colours that I get from that book, the dresses, living in cottages with magic. It just sounds really, really great. But then there are also the darker elements in and out based on the fates and everything, and the vampires. So yeah, I'd probably choose that world. It sounds really magical and cozy, and a brilliant place to live in and just read. Question number 3 is, if you could marry one bookish hero or heroine, who would it be? And I'm just assuming this is all about fantasy romance because that's what the tag is. My answer would be different if it was just from any book. And I think I have to go from Jax from the Once Upon a Broken Heart series again, just because whilst there are loads of guys from fantasy romance books that I'd like to be with, I don't think they'd make very good husbands, so I have to go with Jax, even though he can be a little bit mischievous at times. Again, if I'm marrying him, I get to live in that magical cozy world and spend time in either a palace or a cottage or whatever, and he does have his sweet moments when you warm up to him. So yeah, I will be going with Jax. Question number 4. If you could be one fantasy creature or magical being, what would you be? And for me, I think it just has to be a witch. It's a little bit boring, a little bit obvious. I think a lot of people will probably choose a witch, but I just like the idea of maybe brewing some potions, being able to do little magical spells, not even being like a super magical witch, maybe just a little witch that can, you know, help you do chores around the house, just make everyday life a little bit easier, and in and out just do something really wacky and out there. So yeah, I'm gonna choose a witch. Question number 5. If you could kill one fantasy romance character, who would you off? And this was quite hard. It's been a while since I've read quite a lot of the fantasy romance books that I've read as well, so not many jump to mind. I think the only one that did for me is Midas from the Plated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy. I've only read the first 3 books and my memory of them are quite hazy, aside from really what happens in book 1. And yeah, he's just awful. I would like to kill him. Hopefully he does in the series. Like I said, I've only read the first 3 and even then it's hazy, so when I read I'll find out. But yeah, fingers crossed that happens anyway, because he is just an awful, awful man and he should be punished. Question number 6. What fantasy romance character do you truly believe would be your in real life best friend? This one was really tricky for me. My go-to would have been Tessa from the Infernal Devices series. That's just a generic book question, I guess, because I wouldn't really class that series as a fantasy romance, even though it has romance elements. Definitely more of a historical urban fantasy, I'd say. So it would have been that. So not being Tessa, I think it would probably have to be Signa Farrow from Belladonna. I wouldn't mind living in that world, hanging out with her when she's trying to put up with the, is it Victorian society? Whatever society is, Regency, one of the two, maybe. And hanging out with Death as well. And Blythe, I think it is, her cousin, and just her whole group. I think that would be quite nice. So yeah, I'd probably go with Signa. Question number 7. What would your fantasy weapon of choice be? And for me, this was an easy question. It has been for a while. I think if I had to wield a weapon, bow and arrow. I don't know what it is. I've played a lot of darts, I think, and I do like that. So I did try out some archery and I quite enjoyed it. I never did much of it. It was more of just like something that I did whilst I was on holiday, so never very often. And then since the Hunger Games coming out, it's just like cemented that love for like archery and stuff. So I should do more of it really. But yeah, although dagger would be close second. But yeah, bow and arrow. Question number 9. Pick one fantasy romance book to burn. And this one I really struggled with, and it's not necessarily a fantasy romance, it's more of a paranormal romance, but I'm going with it anyway because this is the only one that I genuinely want to burn. And this is Gothicana by Runix, I think is how you pronounce the author's name. This one I really disliked. I don't know if I gave it a 1 star or 2 star. I did finish it. I loved the setup and the atmosphere of the Dark Castle school vibe. That was really good. I found most of the characters annoying and the romance annoying. I mostly stuck around for the mystery elements, and even those let me down in the end. So yeah, as a romance in general, not very good, which is a shame because I was hoping it would be a good read and it started out as one and then it just, yeah. Question number 8. Who is the sexiest fantasy romance character of all time? This one's very hard. I think a lot of them are. That's what they're made for, I think. But for me, I think my gut is saying Raph from the Kingdom of the Wicked series by Kerry Maniscalco. It was one of the early books I got from Fairy Loot and I remember receiving it with the art print, and it was just beautiful. And I quite like his character as well. I do need to refresh on book 2 so I can finish the series. I don't know what he's like later on. But yeah, my gut is telling me Raph, but there are so many. Question number 10. You can choose one fantasy romance book. It's the only book you will ever be able to read again. What is it? So if I could only read one fantasy romance book for the rest of my life, I think it might have to be House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas, just because that's such a good book on its own. It's so detailed. I love the characters, I love the world, and it's mostly a self-contained story. It holds very well on its own. Although one that I read recently, which I don't know if it's quite a fantasy romance, it's also kind of historical fiction, is The Familiar, which is a standalone by Leigh Bardugo. I loved the romance in that, and the world and the magic and the gritty atmosphere as well. So if I can count The Familiar, if it's fantasy romance enough, that one. If not, probably House of Earth and Blood. And finally, this is the last question, question number 11. If you could recommend one fantasy romance book to a reader that was new to the genre and wanted to try it out, what book would it be? I've got a few. I think one of them would have to be House of Earth and Blood as well, just because it stands so well on its own. And even if they read that, enjoyed that, and that was the only fantasy romance book they ever read, it would still be a good time and you could even go back to it. So that one. I also feel like Sarah J Maas as an author is a really easy author, I'd say, to get into fantasy romance. The writing isn't too complex, the characters are great, the stories are great, it's an easy one. So maybe the ACOTAR series as well, if you wanted more of a complete series, and that one's ongoing as well, so you can still carry on. But no, I also think I would recommend Fourth Wing. I can't recommend the whole series, but Fourth Wing as a book, I binged that one so much. It was so addictive, especially if you've liked, I guess, dystopian books before, because whilst it isn't a dystopian book, it definitely reminded me of like Divergent, but in a fantasy world with more romance. So that one as well. I think yeah, probably ACOTAR or House of Earth and Blood, but maybe Fourth Wing if you liked dystopians before. But yeah, possibly one of those, the ones that are just bingeable, is what I'd go for. So that was it. Those were all the questions in the fantasy romance reader tag. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say. I'm looking forward to checking out the fantasy romance fairy loot books and updating you guys on my thoughts. But as always, I hope you are enjoying your current reads, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!